If you know this, I invite you to sing it with me. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain, but then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. And I'm in need of that balm that makes the wounded whole and heals the sin-sick soul. For I'm troubled and my heart hurts. And I feel as though we are on the verge of wandering in the wilderness yet again. My country and its leaders who have been elected by people like you and me, my country that has afforded me a great deal, is struggling with its identity and frankly its integrity. The thought that we still have to debate on whether our election is sound is troubling. The thought that we still have to debate that an insurrection happened on January 6th is mind-blowing. The thought that we still have to debate the merits of Russia's invasion into Ukraine was anything less than regional power and control. The thought that we still have to debate the atrocities taking place between Israel and Palestine and the human cost that is transpiring is hugely devastating. I'm hitting on the emotional side. I suspect the debate stirred up quite a few things, didn't it? Or maybe it's just me. And yet, are we not above this kind of behavior? One of the saddest lines in the Gospel of Mark that we heard this morning was when Jairus, the father of the little girl, is told that his daughter is dead and he should leave Jesus alone because there is nothing more to be done. Would you settle for that kind of logic? Would those fathers in Ukraine or Palestine and even Israel settle for this kind of logic? Jairus traveled a long way to see Jesus. He had heard things, and he had hope for things to be different. He had hope in Jesus, and he had hope in his status as a leader of the synagogue to be an advocate for his daughter. Can you imagine the despair, the disappointment, the hopelessness felt in that moment when the crowd decided for Jesus? This is how it's gonna be. Your hope is no more. How many children in our world do we leave for dead? How often do the reasonable sounding crowds tell us that there is nothing we can do? Would we live with this kind of logic? Now, if we can't relate to children and families, then let's talk about the woman in the same passage from the Gospel of Mark. This woman would make her way to the physician to be told there is nothing more to be done. This is how it's going to be. She would return to an alienating home because the very problems that required the loving touch of a person also prevented it. After living with this for 12 years, it all comes to an end when she reaches for Jesus' garment. One reach puts an end to alienation and loss. This woman was deemed unclean. She was told to avoid all contact with other human beings. She was told that she could not have relationships or meaningful work, let alone meaningful work that paid a living wage to help offset all that was spent on all the kinds of doctrine just to get minimal answers. She decided to be her own advocate by being a part of the crowd that pressed in on Jesus. Pastor Willie Dwayne Francois III writes, quote, "Her story bears out that it is costlier to follow rigid rules than to prioritize the hunger of the Spirit. Scores of people miss God because of the blinding mechanics of religion, yet faith, a complex praxis of life, transcends religion. Following religious prescriptions more strictly would have cost the woman healing." End quote. Did she accept the kind of logic that this is just how life treats people? No. Now, Jesus is really good at pointing out the irony in things if we allow ourselves to see it. Pastor Francois writes, quote, "The unclean woman interrupts a person who represents her exclusion, Jairus, a leader in the synagogue. On the way to his estate where his daughter teeters on the edge of sickness and death, Jairus observes the healing consequences of a woman's rebellious reach, bodily wholeness and emotional security. The creative forces of justice place her transformation on display, disrupting power dynamics and defying the logic of superiority. Because of her rebellious reach, the unclean woman claims dignity, wholeness, and a future, all in the presence of the religious elites." End quote. Jairus sought help. The woman sought help. What lengths will we go to touch the hem of Jesus? And how is it in this moment in time that someone that has violated human decency in at least 3 commandments be allowed to sell Bibles for $59.99? And how is it that the state superintendent can pass a directive that says that 5th through 12th graders must study the Bible as a part of their history requirements, even though this good book, divinely inspired, is not history and comes at a cost of excluding many due to their faith traditions, which at the country's onset was founded from the freedom of religion. Resilient, rebellious reaches threaten the logic of exclusion and the politics of purity, writes Pastor Francois. Harriet Tubman built an underground railroad. Nanny Helen Burroughs reshaped education for Black women and girls. Jarena Lee preached the gospel in a sexist church. Ida B. Wells exposed the atrocities of American lynching. Fannie Lou Hamer, who was sick and tired of being sick and tired, changed the Democratic Party. An unnamed woman touched the hem of Jesus, and her life changed for the better. Jairus, a father and a leader of the synagogue, continued to seek out Jesus, and his daughter lived. We must keep reaching. We must keep speaking out. We must continue to say something. We must vote. We must keep loving our neighbor, or at least get to know our neighbor. And we must understand the issues before us instead of repeating empty sound bites. For there is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal